65 guests. A rooftop bar in the heart of Midtown Nashville, the kind of space that showed up in lifestyle magazines and weekend guides, with Edison bulbs strung between iron posts and a view of the Cumberland River that made the city look like it had been arranged specifically for the occasion. Vanessa had spent a month planning it. She had hired a caterer. She had commissioned a custom cocktail. She had sent digital invitations with a champagne graphic and a header that read in clean serif font, "The next chapter begins." And everywhere she had gone in the weeks before, her office in the Gulch, her yoga studio, her mother's dining room, she had told the same story about Caleb Stanton, the man who worked with his hands, the man who didn't have vision, the man who had, for 9 years, taken up space in a life she was finally brave enough to claim as fully her own. 65 people had listened. 65 people had believed her. 65 people raised glasses that evening to toast the ending of a marriage they had only ever seen from one angle. What none of them knew, what Vanessa herself did not know, had never thought to ask, had never imagined possible from the quiet man she had decided to leave behind, was that the building they were standing in had been purchased 26 months ago through a holding company whose operating account had never once touched a marital dollar. The deed was filed in Davidson County. The name on it was Stanton Group Properties. Caleb had been the landlord of her divorce party the entire evening. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Wednesday nights in the Stanton house were usually quiet. Caleb cooked. He had always cooked. Not out of habit exactly, but out of the same impulse that made him level a floor before he laid tile, made him read a site twice before he touched it. You did things right, or you did them over. His mother had said that. She had said it standing in the kitchen of a rental house in Germantown when Caleb was 11 years old, and watching her re-stitch a section of him she had already finished once. And he had asked her why she didn't just leave it, and she had looked at him over the top of her glasses and said, "Because the second time you look at something is when you see it clearly." He had never forgotten it. He suspected he never would. He made pork chops that night. Bone-in. Cast iron. The skillet was one his grandmother had passed to his mother, and his mother had passed to him when she moved to assisted living 2 years ago, and it was the heaviest thing in the kitchen, and the one he trusted most. Garlic, fresh rosemary from the pot on the windowsill he tended himself. He set the table for 2, the way he always did. Placemats, proper glasses, a folded cloth napkin at each setting, because his mother had taught him that how you set a table says something about what you believe a meal is worth. Vanessa came downstairs at 7:15. She was dressed for something that was not this house. A silk blouse Caleb didn't recognize, in a shade of burgundy that caught the light. Her hair was down differently than she wore it at home. She was wearing the perfume she saved for evenings out, which he knew because he knew what she smelled like when she wasn't wearing it, and this was not that. He noticed all of it in the time it took her to walk from the bottom of the stairs to the kitchen doorway. He did not say any of it. He said, "Dinner's ready." She said she'd eaten already. Something at the office. She wouldn't be long. He set her plate on the counter, covered it with a second plate the way his mother had always done when someone came home late, and ate alone at a table he had set for 2. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. A dog somewhere. The low sound of a television through the wall. He ate without hurrying. He thought about a load-bearing beam he had been looking at on a job site that afternoon. The way it had been installed just slightly off-center, imperceptible unless you were looking for it, the kind of thing that only became a problem under sustained weight. He heard the door close at 7:34. He heard her car back out of the drive. He was still at the table when her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She had forgotten it. He picked it up to set it somewhere visible for when she came back, and the screen lit with a text preview he saw before he intended to. The name at the top was Marcus. The message was 9 words. Saturday night can't come fast enough. Can't wait to see you. Caleb set the phone face down on the counter. He stood at the sink. He turned on the water, filled a glass, drank it slowly, set the glass down. He was not shaking. He had grown up in a house where hard things arrived without warning, and he had learned before he could name what he was learning that the first thing your body owed you in a moment like that was stillness. Give yourself room to understand the full shape of what you were looking at before you moved. He sat back down at the table. He opened his laptop. By 2 a.m, the kitchen was dark except for the blue-white light of the screen. What he had found was not one message. It was a construction, careful, deliberate, and entirely invisible to anyone who hadn't been trained to look at how things were built. The account appeared first. She had opened it 11 months ago at a credit union in East Nashville, under her maiden name. He found it through a shared digital storage platform they had both used years ago to sync household documents, and that Vanessa had stopped thinking about long before she started using it for other things. He cross-referenced the account against their joint banking history, the way he cross-referenced anything that didn't look right on a job site, methodically, without skipping steps, because the steps were the work. 21 months. $47,000. Moved in amount small enough to register as background noise in the ordinary flow of shared finances. His attention was not ordinary. He had been reading structural documents for 15 years. The emails were in a folder mislabeled with a date string she must have assumed looked like an archive. He almost missed it. He did not miss it. 14 months of correspondence between Vanessa and a man named Marcus Alcott, a developer. She had called him once in passing at a party 2 years ago. In the specific offhand way people mention someone they want you not to think about too carefully, and what he read was not a love affair. It was a project plan. Settlement timelines. Asset identification. The expected division of a marriage described with the calm organizational vocabulary of 2 people who had already decided how it ended and were working backward from the conclusion. He found the line near the bottom of the chain. In an email dated 8 weeks ago. He builds things for other people. Always has. I don't think he knows how to want anything for himself. He's not a bad man. He's just small. Caleb read it once. He did not read it again. He closed the laptop. He made coffee and sat with his hands around the mug and watched the Nashville sky through the kitchen window go from black to bruised gray to the flat pale blue of very early morning. He was not shaking. He was not crying. He was doing what he had always done when he needed to understand something that mattered. He was looking at it slowly, from every angle, with the patience of a man who had spent his entire adult life learning that the second time you look at something is when you see it clearly. He picked up his phone at 5:40 and called Darnell. Darnell answered on the second ring. He was already awake. He had always been already awake. Even when they were coming up together in Germantown, Darnell had been the one who arrived first, who stayed last, who treated everything he agreed to do as a debt of honor, regardless of what it cost him. He was an attorney now, with an office on Charlotte Avenue, and he was the only person alive outside of Caleb's operational structure who understood the full picture. Caleb spoke for 11 minutes. He told it the way he always told things, start to finish. No ornamentation. Just the facts in the order he had found them. The text preview. the shared storage platform, the maiden name account, 21 months, $47,000, the email chain, the project plan, the line about small men. He said the line exactly once, flat and complete. Darnell was quiet for a moment. Thinking quiet, not empty. Then, don't move a dollar. Don't change a single account. Don't confront her. And don't alter your behavior by 1 degree in any direction. I know, Caleb said. Say it. I won't touch anything. Good. The sound of a chair. How long do I have? Caleb looked at the slice of Nashville morning visible through the kitchen window, the first light on the back fence, the rosemary on the windowsill. 4 weeks, he said. Maybe a little less. Darnell asked why 4 weeks. There's something I need to confirm, Caleb said. Darnell had known him long enough to understand what that meant. He said he would begin pulling the framework together and ask for everything from the storage platform. It was already compiled. The confirmation arrived 6 days later. Caleb was on a job site in Brentwood when his property manager, a woman named Loretta, called him on his personal line, which she only used for one category of matter. I have a venue booking you'll want to hear about, she said. The Ridgeline was on the top 2 floors of a building on 5th Avenue North in Midtown Nashville. A rooftop event space with a full bar, retractable weather screening, and a sight line to the Cumberland River that 3 separate publications had described in the past 18 months as the best urban view in the city. Caleb had acquired the building 32 months ago when the previous owner defaulted mid-renovation, completed the build-out with operating capital from 2 earlier properties, and opened the Ridgeline to private bookings 14 months later. It had been booked 41 weekends in a row. Loretta read him the booking details. Client: Vanessa Stanton. Event type: celebration dinner, private. Guest count: 65. Date: 4 weeks from Saturday. Deposit paid in full. Caleb stood on the job site with the phone against his ear and the Nashville afternoon around him. The sound of a nail gun somewhere behind the framing. The smell of cut lumber. The particular quality of light on a work site in late afternoon that he had loved since he was 19 years old and first understood that making something solid from raw material was the most honest thing he knew how to do. His wife had booked her divorce party in his building. She had no idea it was his building. She had lived alongside him for 9 years and had decided, somewhere around year 3, that she understood exactly what he was and what he was not, and had not revisited that assessment since. She had looked at a man who worked with his hands and seen the limit of him. She had not looked at what his hands were building. In the years her eyes were elsewhere, he had been building the building she was standing in. Confirm it, he said. Loretta paused the way she always paused when something required acknowledgement before it could be processed. She had worked with him for 7 years. Full confirmation. Event coordinator notified. We'll staff it as a standard full-service booking. Nothing unusual, Caleb said. Everything exactly as it would be. Understood. He ended the call. He stood on the job site for another moment. He looked at the framing around him. He thought about a load-bearing beam installed just off-center. He thought about sustained weight. You did things right, or you did them over. But some things, when they finally came down, you didn't rebuild. You simply cleared the site and started from different ground. That evening, he called his sister. Brianna answered from her house in Antioch, where she had lived for 11 years, and where she maintained, in the particular organized warmth of a woman who had built her own life without asking anyone's permission, A household that smelled like something slow-cooked and felt like the one place Caleb had always been able to say anything without translating it first. He told her all of it. The text, the storage platform, the account in the maiden name, $47,000 over 21 months. Marcus Alcott. The project plan. The line. He told her the line once, flat, the way he'd read. When he finished, Brianna was quiet. Then she said, "She booked the party in your building." "Yes, Caleb." Her voice shifted, settled into something direct. "What do you need from me?" he told her. She was quiet in a different way, the measuring quiet of a woman who had watched her brother her whole life and knew the difference between a decision he had made and a decision he was still making. This was not the second kind. "Are you sure?" she said. "I've been sure," he said. "Since 2 in the morning. The divorce papers came on a Monday. A courier at his office, mid-morning, while he was on the phone with a subcontractor about tile. He finished the call, took the envelope, set it on his desk, and opened it. Vanessa's attorney was named Caldwell. Darnell had mentioned the name once, in the way a careful person mentions a name they have already filed away. Aggressive, discovery-focused, the kind of attorney who understood that the full weight of legal process, deployed early, could break a position before a single argument was made. Caleb read the filing completely. He aligned it with the corner of his desk pad and sent Darnell one text. Papers arrived. Caldwell, Darnell responded in under a minute. Expected. We're ready. 3 days later, Darnell brought in a forensic financial analyst named Priscilla Oakes, who worked from an office in Germantown that could have belonged to an accountant or a therapist, and was deliberately neither. She was 53, unhurried, and asked exactly the questions that needed to be asked in exactly the order that established the most useful picture. She shook Caleb's hand once. She sat down. "Tell me everything you know about Marcus Alcott." He told her. She made 8 lines of notes. She clicked her pen closed. 12 days, she said. She was back in 10. Marcus Alcott presented as a developer. The presentation had been constructed with the kind of care that worked on someone moving fast, someone who needed the story to be real and had enough surface evidence to support believing it. Alcott Development Group had a clean website, a registered address in the Gulch, and a professional profile that suggested a decade of successful projects across Tennessee and Georgia. It had 4 employees, 2 of whom had been there less than 8 months. One of them answered the phone. The condo in Germantown that Marcus had taken Vanessa to see, the one he described as a place they could make their own. The one she had mentioned in 2 different emails with the particular warmth of someone who has been shown a door they've decided to walk through, carried a mortgage at 91% of its appraised value. Nearly nothing down. No meaningful equity. It was a set piece, something with an address and square footage and a renovated kitchen that a woman who needed to see something real could stand inside and feel like the future. The renovation itself was what Priscilla had spent most of her 10 days on. The kitchen. The new flooring, the custom cabinetry that Vanessa had described in one email to a friend as finally something designed for how people actually live. Priscilla had reconstructed the funding trail with the steady precision of a woman who knew exactly where people believed their transactions disappeared. The renovation had been funded almost entirely from the $47,000 Vanessa had redirected from their joint marital account over 21 months. Her money, moved in careful increments, deposited into the maiden name account, withdrawn in amounts that aligned almost exactly, draw by draw, with the contractor invoices Priscilla had located through permit filings with Metro Nashville. Marcus hadn't built her anything. He had accepted her money, handed it back to her in the form of a kitchen she was meant to think of as his gift, and allowed her to experience it as proof that she had chosen correctly. He had taken her need to believe she was ascending, her willingness to decide quickly, and her contempt for the man she was leaving behind, and he had used all three with the unhurried efficiency of someone who understood how to operate inside other people's momentum. He had done it before. The last section of Priscilla's report was about a woman in Memphis named Denise. 3 years prior, Denise had filed a civil complaint against Marcus Alcott for fraudulent misrepresentation and financial predation. The complaint was 14 pages. Specific. Documented the kind of document a person produces after months of collecting herself, deciding she is not going to let the story belong only to him. She had withdrawn the case 15 months later. The report noted that she had cited financial strain and the particular fatigue produced by legal processes that outlast the people inside them. Priscilla had documented the connection between Memphis and Nashville through a financial pattern identical in sequence. The approach, the credibility construction, the stage prop property, the money that was not a gift, returned to the woman it was taken from as evidence of a future that was never being built for her. Caleb sat in his truck outside Darnell's office with the folder on the passenger seat and the Nashville afternoon pressing through the glass. He was not satisfied. He had not expected to be. What he felt instead was the particular strange completeness of understanding a thing fully. Not the relief of being right, but the weight of seeing clearly what had been happening in a room he had believed was his. Vanessa had stopped verifying her assumptions about him years ago. She had been so certain about the limit of him that she had left the door open, and a man like Marcus Alcott had walked through it and helped himself. He picked up his phone and called Brianna. He told her how bad it was. He told her about the kitchen. That the $47,000 had been returned to Vanessa as renovated cabinetry and new floors, handed to her as tenderness, experienced by her as proof that she deserved better. Brianna was quiet for a moment. "She doesn't know yet," she said. "No. When does she find out?" Caleb looked through the windshield. Down the block, a building was going up on a corner that had been a vacant lot 2 years ago. Someone's numbers made physical. "Rising. When it's time," he said. He coordinated with Darnell and Loretta over the following 3 weeks, in the same way he coordinated every project. Calmly, without urgency, in short conversations that covered only what they needed to cover. Loretta would manage the ridgeline that evening, as she always did. Full staff, full service, nothing that signaled anything other than a standard event. Darnell would be present with the document case. One additional thing had been arranged, and Caleb had handled it himself. He had called the building's weekend operations supervisor and confirmed the on-site owner walkthrough he conducted twice per month. He had scheduled it for that Saturday. 9:45. The same time he always did it, because he was the building's owner, and the ridgeline was his property, and he had been walking through it on the 2nd and 4th Saturday of every month since it opened. And that was not going to change because someone had rented it for the evening. Everything else was simply waiting. Vanessa arrived at the ridgeline at 7:15 in a dress the color of deep water, fitted and deliberate, the kind of choice that announces itself without appearing to try. Marcus Alcott was beside her, broad across the shoulders, well presented, moving through the space with the easy authority of a man who understood what it meant to be seen in a room like this. He fit the story perfectly. He was there to fit it. 65 people in their evening best raised glasses and talked and laughed and offered toasts to a woman they had been told was finally, rightfully, joyfully free. Caleb's name was not mentioned. He had been written out of the story so thoroughly that his omission required no effort. At 9:43, Loretta stepped to the center of the rooftop with the venue's cordless microphone. She was composed, unhurried, and spoke with the clean professional authority of a woman who had been managing events for 11 years and had never in that time given anyone a reason to argue with her. "Good evening. I need to let you know that the property owner will be conducting a scheduled facility walkthrough beginning at 9:45. This is a routine procedure, and we appreciate your patience. Full refunds for tonight's booking have been authorized, and our staff will be happy to assist with any questions." The rooftop shifted. Voices overlapped. People turned to each other. Vanessa moved through the crowd toward Loretta with her chin level, and her voice controlled. She had a contract, a confirmed booking, 65 guests, a paid deposit in full, and she needed someone to tell her right now what the property owner had to do with any of this. Loretta listened to all of it with the patient, unmovable courtesy of someone who had already been told exactly what to say. "The owner conducts routine walkthroughs on the second and fourth Saturday of each month," she said. "Tonight falls within that schedule. The refund will be processed in full. I'm sorry for the disruption." Before Vanessa could find the next thing to say, the door from the interior stairwell opened. Caleb walked out onto the rooftop. He was wearing a clean dark jacket over a work shirt, no tie. The specific unceremonious dress of a man who has arrived to do something practical rather than to be seen. He carried a clipboard with the walkthrough sheet on it. Loretta fell into step beside him. They moved together toward the northwest corner of the space where the mechanical screening had been recently serviced, and Caleb looked at it with the focused, proprietary attention of a man checking the work of someone he pays. He noted something on the clipboard. He said 2 words to Loretta, who nodded and made a note of her own. He had not looked at Vanessa. He moved to the bar setup. He checked the surface drainage channel. He crouched briefly to look at the base of one of the iron posts where a seam in the decking had been flagged on the last walkthrough. He stood, noted it, moved on. He was halfway across the rooftop before he looked up. He looked at Vanessa across the full width of the space. It was not a performance. There was nothing theatrical in it, no manufactured pause, no curated expression. No moment shaped for the audience that had gone completely still around them. It was simply a man looking at someone he had known for 9 years, in his building, on his rooftop, with his clipboard in his hand, and all of it, held in a look that lasted 4 seconds and said none of it out loud. The $47,000 moved in careful increments. The email about small men. The party she had planned in his building without knowing it was his building. The 9 years of a marriage she had decided the meaning of before she had asked for the full picture. All of it, held there in 4 seconds, and then released. He looked away. He turned to Darnell, who had appeared from the interior stairwell, and now stood 2 steps behind him, document case in hand, expression professionally pleasant. Caleb said, "Is the LLC filing current?" Darnell said, "Field and updated. Davidson County Records Office has the complete chain of title." Caleb nodded. He looked at his clipboard. He noted something else. He said to Loretta, "The Northwest Post seam needs to be addressed before next month. Have Hendricks look at it Tuesday." Loretta said she would handle it. He did not address Vanessa. He did not address Marcus, who was standing 8 feet away with his hands in his jacket pockets and the specific stillness of a man trying to be invisible inside a room he could not leave. Caleb walked to Vanessa's mother, Eleanor, who was standing near the riverside railing with a champagne glass she had entirely forgotten she was holding. He spoke to her quietly, at a volume the people immediately around her could hear. "The property is owned by Stanton Group Properties," he said. "It has been for 32 months. The LLC is premarital in its funding, established capital from before the wedding, documented and filed. Her attorney will have the full chain of title, first thing Monday morning. He paused. She'll want to see it before the asset discovery process moves forward. He looked at Eleanor directly, not unkindly. I thought you should know that before you left tonight. He did not wait for a response. He crossed back to the northwest corner with Loretta. He finished the walkthrough. He initialed the bottom of the sheet. He thanked the 2 staff members who had been present, called them each by name, because he had always called people by name. He shook Darnell's hand. Then he walked to the interior stairwell door and went inside. He did not look back. On the rooftop, nobody moved for a moment. The Edison bulbs swayed faintly. The Cumberland glittered in the distance. 65 people stood inside a building they now understood belonged to the man they had spent the evening toasting the departure of. Marcus Alcott found his phone. Something on it required his immediate attention somewhere that was not here. Vanessa stood at the center of the rooftop. The dress was still perfectly fitted. Her glass was still in her hand. Every surface of the evening she had planned, the lighting, the view, the gathered witnesses, the story she had told about herself and the man she was leaving was exactly as she had arranged it. And none of it meant what it had meant 40 minutes ago. She had planned this evening in his building. She had delivered her declaration of freedom in a space he owned. She had stood on his floor and told 65 people that she was finally her own. She had no idea. She had never thought to look. And the quiet man she had decided had no vision had simply been here the whole time, watching the work get done. Caldwell called Darnell on a Monday morning. Professional, organized. He laid out the position cleanly. Stanton Group properties, formed during the marriage, appreciated during the shared household, subject to equitable division under state law. He requested full disclosure of capitalization records, founding documentation, and operational financials. Darnell said he would provide complete documentation at the appropriate stage. Caldwell pushed on the founding capital. Darnell said the documentation would speak for itself, offered to see him at the deposition, and wished him a productive start to the week. The record was 9 years deep and clean at every layer. Caleb had received a legal settlement from a contractor dispute 7 years before the marriage, a premises liability claim that had taken 3 years to resolve and paid out in a lump sum he had held in a separate account, in his name alone, for 14 months before he identified the right property. A 2-unit commercial building on Dickerson Pike in East Nashville, which the market had mispriced because the surrounding blocks looked to most investors like a long-term complication. Caleb had grown up 3 neighborhoods over and read the corridor differently. He saw the transit line. He saw the rezoning movement working its way through Metro Council. He saw a price built entirely from other people's willingness to stop looking. He bought it. He managed it himself. He reinvested every dollar it generated. He did not tell Vanessa. He did not hide it from her in any dramatic sense. He simply did not offer it to someone who had already decided what his offerings were worth. The way you stop presenting work to a client who has already made up their mind and is simply waiting for the meeting to be over. Over 9 years, 1 property became 4. 4 became 9. 9 became 13. Across Davidson, Williamson, and Rutherford counties, funded entirely from the compounding returns of that first property on Dickerson Pike. No marital account had ever touched it. Stanton Group properties, net asset value, $5.3 million. The marital assets Vanessa had built her entire legal strategy around, the house, the joint savings account, totaled $312,000. She had spent 21 months engineering a financial extraction from the wrong set of numbers. The second time you look at something, his mother had told him, is when you see it clearly. The deposition room was on the 14th floor of a building downtown. Neutral. Deliberately so. Long table. 4 glasses. A water pitcher. The tissue box nobody was going to touch. Caldwell and Vanessa were already seated when Caleb and Darnell walked in. Vanessa looked up. Something moved across her face. A half-second adjustment. Barely visible. The specific micro-expression of a person whose preparation for this moment did not quite account for the person who walked in. The walkthrough had changed something in how she looked at him. She had walked past his architectural drawings in their home office for 9 years. She had attended a party in his building without knowing it, and the man who had crossed that rooftop with a clipboard and called the staff by name was not the man she had decided he was. She recovered. She looked at the legal pad in front of her. Caleb sat across from her. Darnell placed his document case beside his chair and greeted Caldwell with the pleasant nod of a man who harbored no personal grievance. Caldwell laid out his position with the focused energy of someone who had spent 10 days constructing an argument and believed in its foundation. He was thorough. He was prepared. The LLC formed during the marriage. Appreciation occurring within the shared household. Equitable division precedent under Tennessee law. He delivered it cleanly, without theater. Darnell thanked him with genuine courtesy. He opened the document case. He did not rush. The first document was a settlement payment record. Premarital. Notarized, 7 years before the wedding date. Below it, the bank account opened in Caleb's name alone, 14 months before they were married, holding those settlement funds and nothing else. Below that, the LLC formation documents, founding capital contribution, source account, dates, everything tracing to the premarital record, dollar for dollar. Then 9 years of operational financials. Quarterly statements. Property acquisition records, every transaction in the LLC's history, in chronological order, none of them touching a joint marital account. Not once. Not ever. Darnell arranged them on the table with the unhurried precision of a man who had organized them 100 times in preparation and could have done it without looking. The paper trail did not merely support Caleb's position. It closed every door Caldwell had been planning to walk through. Darnell folded his hands. He let the documents sit. Caldwell studied the records. The room was very quiet. Then, Darnell placed a second folder on the table. Nobody had asked for it. He set it down with the same calm deliberateness as everything else. "This one pertains to a counterclaim," he said. He opened it and turned it toward Caldwell. 21 months of transfers from the joint marital account to an account held in Miss Stanton's maiden name. Total, $47,200. Reconstructed through forensic financial analysis, he set Priscilla's documentation beside it. The columns, the contractor invoices, the permit records, the renovation funded from marital funds redirected by Vanessa and returned to her by Marcus Alcott as evidence of a future he had never intended to build. Under Tennessee law, he said, the deliberate redirection of marital funds for non-marital purposes constitutes dissipation. We'll be entering this into the record. Caldwell asked for a recess. Darnell refilled his water glass. He sat back in his chair, patient as the load-bearing walls of a well-built structure. Vanessa did not follow her attorney out. She sat at the far end of the table with her hands flat on the surface, and she was looking at Caleb. Not with the composed performance she had worn into the room. With something else, something unresolved. The expression of a person moving backward through a timeline, trying to locate the exact moment when the story she had been telling herself had parted from the story that was actually true. Caleb looked back at her. His face was still. Not closed. Still. No anger in it, no satisfaction either. Just the complete, patient attention of a man who had nothing left to perform and nothing left to prove. 9 years of a marriage held in a look that asked none of them out loud. He did not look away. She looked down first. The door opened. Caldwell stepped back in. He did not sit immediately. He straightened his folder. He looked at Darnell. "My client would like to discuss settlement terms," he said. Brianna's house in Antioch smelled like something slow-cooked and familiar, and the dining room table was set for 7. Caleb was already there when the doorbell rang the first time. He was seated at the far end, talking quietly with their cousin Raymond, who had driven up from Murfreesboro that afternoon with the easy, settled energy of a man who understood exactly why he had been asked. Their uncle Gerald was across from Raymond, 70 years old, retired. A man of extremely few words and an instinct for the center of a thing that Caleb had always trusted completely. Vanessa arrived at 7:15. She was wearing a gray wrap dress and the composed expression of a woman who had decided in the car to be fine, and she wore that decision the way she wore everything, completely, without visible seams. She hugged Brianna warmly. She greeted Raymond with the easy familiarity of someone who had sat at these tables before. She found her seat. She saw Caleb. A small rearrangement moved across her face. Not fear, not guilt exactly. Something more like the rapid recalculation of a person who has just understood that the room is not configured the way she expected it to be. She found her composure again quickly. She accepted wine. She spoke to Raymond and Gerald with the practiced ease of a woman who had always known how to work a family table. For the first 40 minutes, she managed the room nearly exactly as she had always managed rooms. At the 43rd minute, Brianna set her fork down. The sound of it settled through the table. She looked at her sister-in-law and began to speak. She did not raise her voice. She had their mother's way with hard things, plain, sequential, without building toward a crescendo. Just the facts, in order, with the full weight of a woman who had watched her brother carry something for too long and was no longer going to be quiet about what was in the room. The timeline. 21 months, $47,000. Marcus Alcott and what he actually was. The shell company. The stage prop condo. The mortgage at 91%. The renovation in Germantown paid for with money Vanessa had taken from her own marriage and given to a man who handed it back to her as proof of his love. The woman in Memphis, named Denise. The pattern between Memphis and Nashville documented across 2 columns that made the methodology look exactly like what it was. A system practiced and refined. And then the email. Brianna quoted it. She did not look away from Vanessa's face. Vanessa set her wine glass down. She said the documents were selective. She said the marriage had been harder than anyone at this table understood. She looked to Raymond, who looked at his plate. She looked to Gerald, who turned his glass slowly and said nothing. She looked to Brianna. Brianna looked back at her and did not blink. The table had withdrawn, not cruelly, without ceremony. It had stopped providing the foothold she was reaching for, one by one, until she was standing inside a version of the evening that no longer had any support. Caleb set his fork down. He looked at her across the table and said, "You made your decision about what I was early. And once you made it, you didn't go back to check whether you were right. Even when what was in front of you was telling you something different, you had already written the story. I was the ceiling in it." He was quiet for a moment. "So I stopped trying to show you anything. I built what I built without asking for your belief, because your belief had stopped being something I needed." He picked up his napkin. He folded it and set it beside his plate. "Keep the house," he said. "Keep everything you went to court for. All of it." He stood. He looked at Brianna. "Dinner was excellent," he said. He shook Raymond's hand. He gripped Gerald's shoulder once, briefly, the way you do with someone who has simply shown up, and whose showing up means everything. He did not look at Vanessa again. He walked to the front door and out into the night, and the door closed behind him, and the Nashville evening was wide and dark and entirely his. The settlement was finalized on a Wednesday. Vanessa kept the house. She assumed the outstanding mortgage. She received a cash disbursement from the joint account. The LLC was not part of the conversation. It had never been part of the conversation. Caldwell had understood this before the second deposition session. The condo listing in Germantown went live on a Thursday. By the weekend, it had traveled the same channels the next chapter invitations had traveled 8 weeks before. The same contacts. The same professional networks. The same people who had raised glasses and wished Vanessa well. People who now saw a property posted solely under Marcus Alcott's name, with no mention of who had funded the renovation that was its primary selling point, and began, in the way people do when information arrives from multiple directions, to ask questions that already contained most of their answers. Eleanor, Vanessa's mother, had begun correcting the record. She did not post anything publicly. She sat across from women she had known for 25 years and told them what she had seen, what she had said about Caleb that she now knew was wrong, and what the documents actually showed. She said it the way a woman says something she has already fully reckoned with, plainly, without softening, with the specific credibility of someone who has nothing to gain from the correction except her own integrity. Brianna worked differently. She called the people who had known Caleb for years and watched him be replaced, in the shared social narrative, by a version of himself that no one who actually knew him recognized. She told them about the building. She told them about the company. She told them what Marcus Alcott had actually done with $47,000 of Vanessa's money. Raymond and Gerald handled it the way men in their circle handled things. 2 sentences when 2 sentences were enough. You know what he built. You know what she moved. You know what that man Marcus actually was. Truth moves the same way it always does when the people carrying it have nothing to gain from it except being the kind of people they want to be. Person by person. Conversation by conversation. The way a foundation is laid. The package to Memphis went out through Darnell's courier on a Friday. Addressed to Denise, marked personal and confidential. Inside, Priscilla's complete investigative report. The documented financial pattern between Memphis and Nashville. Denise's own original complaint, returned to her now with everything she hadn't been able to access when she first needed it. Darnell's cover letter was 4 sentences. It identified the sender. It explained the context. It made no requests. It ended, "We hope this finds you well and with what you needed." Denise received the package at her desk. She had worked in civil litigation for 12 years. She read every page with the careful, unhurried attention of a woman who had waited a long time to see exactly this kind of documentation. She sat for a moment when she finished. Then she called her attorney. In Nashville, Marcus Alcott's phone produced notifications he had not prepared for. 14 months later, the 4th-floor conference room of a building in Brentwood had windows on 2 sides. Below them, a job site was active, framing going up on a new mixed-use development, the skeleton of a thing still becoming what it was going to be. Caleb watched it from across the conference table, with the involuntary attention of a man who has spent his entire life reading structures at every stage of their making. He was in a meeting with his project director, his acquisitions manager, and the commercial real estate attorney who had handled his last 4 deals and who had described Caleb's approach to distressed asset acquisition in a letter to a potential partner as the most disciplined she had seen in 15 years of practice. Caleb had not read the letter. He did not need outside verification of the things he already knew. The discussion was about a building in the Nations, a neighborhood on the west side of Nashville that had been undervalued for a decade because it had not yet announced itself to the people who tracked these things from a distance. Caleb had been watching it for 3 years. He had seen the infrastructure investment. He had seen the rezoning activity. He had seen the price that reflected what other people didn't know rather than what the asset was actually worth. He was ready. He listened more than he spoke, which was always his way. When he did speak, the room adjusted, not because of volume, but because the people in it had studied his track record and made their own assessment of what his words were worth. This was what he had built. Not just the properties, not just the portfolio, the room, the posture of the people in it, the complete absence of any need to prove himself to anyone seated across from him. The meeting ended at 3:40. His acquisitions manager shook his hand on the way out and said the Nation's deal was the best-positioned asset he'd seen since he joined the company. Caleb thanked him and meant it and walked him to the elevator. Darnell appeared in the doorway when they had gone. He set a folder on the conference table, the final executed documents on Acquisition 12. 12 closes Friday, he said. Caleb looked at the folder. 13's better. Darnell smiled. He picked up his jacket. Flight at 6. I know. Darnell left. Caleb stood at the window. He knew that Vanessa was managing a mortgage that had proven heavier than anticipated, in a market that had moved in directions that made the house worth less than what she owed on it for the time being. He knew that her professional circle had quietly rearranged itself in the months since the Ridgeline evening. He knew she was telling people the divorce had been mutual and that some of them believed her. He did not spend time on it. Some structures, when they finally came down, you didn't rebuild. You simply cleared the site. He knew that Marcus Alcott had retained his 3rd attorney in 5 months in connection with a civil action filed in Shelby County and a parallel proceeding in Davidson County, both moving with the grinding momentum of cases managed by people who had stopped being willing to be exhausted into stopping. He knew that Brianna's back porch had a new railing. He had replaced it on a Sunday in October without telling her it needed doing. The way he fixed things for the people he loved, quietly, without making it a moment. Because the work itself was the point. She had called him from the yard when she noticed. She had said he was going to make her cry, and he had said it was just a railing, and she had said that was exactly what she meant. He picked up his phone. A voicemail from Eleanor, Vanessa's mother, left at 2:30 that afternoon. She left one most weeks now. They were brief. This one was about a leaky faucet in her kitchen that she couldn't figure out. She described it in a way that made clear she wasn't really asking him to fix it, just that she had wanted to tell someone about it. She said she hoped his week was going well. She said goodbye warmly. He would call her back from the airport. The flight lifted at 6:15 and banked southwest over the city, and in the late evening light, Caleb could see the cluster of Midtown buildings and the 5th Avenue North Corridor and the roofline of the building on the corner whose top 2 floors contained a room he had walked through on a Saturday evening with a clipboard while his wife stood in it. In a dress the color of deep water, surrounded by 65 people who had no idea whose floor they were standing on. He watched it until it passed below the wing. He thought about a rental house in Germantown, and a woman re-stitching a hem she had already finished once, and a boy asking why she didn't just leave it, and her answer that had not left him in 30 years. He thought about what all of it had built in him, the patience that had looked to people who stopped looking closely, like an absence of ambition, the stillness that had never been weakness, the particular understanding, hard-won and permanent, that the most dangerous thing you could do to a man like him was decide you knew the limit of him and stop paying attention. You did things right, or you did them over. Some things you only had to do once. The plane leveled into its arc over the Cumberland Valley, and the city fell away behind him, and what was ahead was simply this: a window seat, a quiet engine, and work still worth doing. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.